The morning sun always won the race. It would peek through the gap in my curtains, right where the pink unicorns met the sparkly rainbows, and land on my face like a warm, good morning kiss. Usually, that was my favorite way to wake up, but not today. Today was my birthday. I was 8, and the sun felt a little lonely. I stayed in bed for a few extra minutes, listening. The house was quiet, not the good kind of quiet, like when Dad was trying not to wake anyone on a Saturday morning. It was a heavy quiet, the kind that presses down on you. Mom was usually the noise of our house, her humming while she made coffee, the clinking of her favorite mug, the soft sound of her slippers shuffling on the hardwood floor. But there was nothing. I slipped out of bed, my feet cold on the floorboards, and tiptoed to the door. I opened it just a crack. The hallway was empty. A line of sunlight stretched from the big window at the end, and dust motes danced in it like tiny, silent fairies. Still no sound from Mom and Dad's room. Still no smell of pancakes, the special birthday breakfast Mom always promised. My heart did a little thump-thump that wasn't the excited kind. It was the nervous kind. Maybe they were just being extra quiet to surprise me. Yes, that had to be it. I pictured them hiding behind the living room couch with a big cake, ready to yell, "Surprise!" the moment I walked in. A little smile found my lips. I walked down the hall, making my steps as loud as I could. Clomp, clomp, clomp. That would definitely let them know I was awake. I peeked into the living room. No one was hiding behind the couch. The room was empty, tidy, and still. The only thing moving was the clock on the wall. Tick, tock, tick, tock. It sounded louder than ever. Mom was in the kitchen. She was standing by the window looking out at the backyard, her back to me. She was holding her favorite mug, the one with the chipped rim that Dad always joked he'd replace. She wasn't humming. She wasn't moving. She was just standing there. "Mom?" I said, my voice small. She didn't turn. She didn't even flinch. It was like I hadn't spoken at all. I took a few steps closer. I could see her reflection in the glass of the window. Her face was blank, empty, like one of my dolls before I draw a smile on it. "Mom?" I tried again, a little louder this time. "It's me." Still nothing. It felt like I was invisible. I walked right up to her, close enough to touch the back of her fuzzy robe. I could smell her sleepy time tea scent. It usually made me feel safe. Right now, it just made my stomach feel wobbly. I looked around the kitchen. There were no balloons, no banner that said, "Happy birthday, Chloe," like last year. The counter was clean, except for a single unopened carton of eggs. No pancake mix, no sprinkles, no anything. The silence in the room was so big, I felt like I could taste it. It tasted like nothing. I reached out a hesitant hand and tugged on the sleeve of her robe. The fabric was soft, familiar. "Mom, it's my birthday," I whispered. My voice trembled a little. For a moment, I thought I saw her shoulder move, a tiny twitch, but then it was gone. It might have just been my imagination. She remained a statue made of sadness, staring at the green grass outside. Just then, Dad walked in. He was already dressed for work, his tie a little crooked like it always was. He stopped in the doorway, and his morning smile faltered when he saw us. He looked from Mom's back to my face, and a look I didn't understand crossed his eyes. It was a mix of tired and sorry. "Hey, birthday girl," he said, his voice trying too hard to be cheerful. It sounded like a cartoon character. He walked over and ruffled my hair. I leaned into his touch, wanting to be picked up, to be told everything was okay. But he just stood beside me. "What's for birthday breakfast?" he asked, looking at the empty counter. He nudged Mom gently. "Honey, Chloe's awake." Mom didn't answer. She didn't even turn her head. Dad sighed, a long, quiet sound that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. He walked around her, standing between her and the window, forcing her to see him. "Laura?" he said, his voice soft. "It's Chloe's birthday." I watched her face. For the first time, her eyes moved. They flickered to Dad's face, but they were glassy, like a doll's eyes. There was no recognition in them, no anger, no happiness, just nothing. It was scarier than if she had been yelling. She slowly turned her head and looked back out the window as if Dad wasn't even there. A cold rock settled in my stomach. This wasn't a surprise. This was something wrong. Dad's face got tight. He ran a hand over his hair and then looked at me, forcing another smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You know what? I have a great idea. How about a special birthday breakfast at the Pancake Palace? My treat." The Pancake Palace was where we went for extra special days. They had pancakes with whipped cream faces and chocolate chip eyes. Normally, I would have been jumping up and down. But today, The thought of it made me feel heavy. "What about Mom?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Is she coming?" Dad knelt down in front of me, putting his hands on my shoulders. "Mom's not feeling very well today, sweetie. She needs to rest. So it'll be just you and me. Our special birthday date. How does that sound?" He was trying to make it sound exciting, but all I heard was that Mom wasn't coming, that Mom wasn't well. I looked past him, at her still, silent back. I wanted to ask what was wrong with her. I wanted to ask if I had done something to make her sick. Yesterday was a normal day. I'd gone to school, I'd done my homework, I'd even cleaned my room without being asked. I couldn't think of anything I had done wrong. The question got stuck in my throat, a big, prickly lump I couldn't swallow. I just nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. Dad squeezed my shoulders. "Great! Go get dressed in your favorite outfit and I'll be ready to go in 5 minutes." As I walked out of the kitchen, I took one last look back. Dad was standing behind Mom, his hands on her arms, his head resting on her shoulder. He was whispering something to her, but she was just as still as before. A lonely island in the middle of our sunny kitchen. I went to my room and opened my closet, the wooden door groaning softly. My favorite outfit hung right in the front. A yellow dress with little white daisies embroidered on the collar. Mom had bought it for me on a sunny afternoon last spring. We were in the store, and she held it up against me, her eyes sparkling. "It's the color of sunshine," she'd said, her voice warm like a hug. "Just like you, my Chloe." I pulled the dress off the hanger, the fabric cool and smooth in my hands. I put it on, hoping, with the secret, magical thinking that only a kid can have, that the dress would work like a charm. I hoped that when Mom saw me in it, she would remember the sunshine, that it would fix whatever was wrong inside her. I carefully brushed my hair, pulling the comb through the little knots with extra care, making it neat just the way she liked. I finished by tying it back with a bright yellow ribbon, a final touch of hope. When I went back downstairs, Dad was waiting by the front door, jingling his car keys in his pocket. The sound was nervous and loud in the quiet house. He wasn't looking at me. His gaze was fixed down the hall toward the kitchen. His shoulders were slumped, and for a second, he looked smaller. When he heard my footsteps on the stairs, he straightened his back and spun around, that fake bright smile pasted on his face again. It didn't fit him right. It was like a mask that was slipping. "There's my birthday girl. You look beautiful. An absolute ray of sunshine. Ready to go?" I nodded, my eyes darting past him to the kitchen entrance one last time. I was hoping, praying, that Mom would be standing there, her arms open, a real smile on her face, ready to say it was all a silly joke. But there was only silence and the empty hallway. The car ride was quiet too, but a different kind of quiet from the house. It was a strained, hollow quiet. Dad turned on the radio, and a man with a booming voice was talking about the weather. A beautiful sunny day ahead, folks. Perfect day to be outside and soak up that vitamin D. It felt like he was talking about a different planet. Dad tried to hum along to a car insurance commercial, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. The rhythm was fast and jerky, like a bug trapped in a jar. I stared out the window, watching the world go on as if it were any other Tuesday. A man was walking a golden retriever. 2 kids were having a race on their scooters. Everything was bright and normal, and it made our silent bubble feel even stranger and sadder. The Pancake Palace was just as loud and colorful as I remembered. Red and white checkered tablecloths, the smell of syrup and bacon, and balloons tied to the backs of chairs. A waitress with a big, friendly smile and a pink bow in her hair showed us to a booth by the window. She handed me a special laminated kids menu and a box of 4 crayons. "Well, happy birthday, sweetie," she said, her voice warm and real. "The big 8, huh? Got any exciting birthday plans?" Her kindness was like a little poke to a bruise. I felt my throat get tight. I didn't know how to answer. What could I say? My mom isn't speaking today. I just looked down at the menu and mumbled, "Thanks." Dad jumped in to fill the silence. "We're starting with the world-famous pancakes right here," he said with forced enthusiasm. When the waitress left, Dad leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "So, 8 years old, that's a big deal," he said, trying again. "Do you feel any different? Wiser?" I shook my head, picking up the blue crayon and tracing the outline of a cartoon pancake wearing a chef's hat. "Not really." "Well, you're in 3rd grade now. You're learning all sorts of new things. Reading those big chapter books all by yourself." He was just listing things, filling the air with words that felt like packing peanuts, light and empty. That's when I saw the family in the booth across from us. A mom, a dad, and a little girl who looked about my age. She had pigtails. The mom was laughing, her head tilted back. She leaned forward and cut the little girl's pancakes into tiny, perfect squares. Then she speared one with a fork and held it out for her. The girl giggled and ate it right from her mom's fork. Then the mom reached out and gently wiped a smudge of chocolate from the girl's cheek with her thumb. It was a small, simple thing, but watching it made my chest feel like a big, empty cave. "I miss Mom," I said suddenly. The words just fell out of my mouth before I could stop them. Quiet but heavy in the noisy restaurant. Dad's practiced smile vanished completely. His face looked tired again, and much older than it had this morning. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. His hand was big and warm, but it wasn't Mom's. "I know, sweetie. I miss her too," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Why is she sick?" I asked, finally letting the big, prickly question out. My eyes stung. "Is it because I did something bad? Was it me?" His eyes widened in alarm. "Oh, Chloe, no, never. Don't you ever think that." He squeezed my hand, his grip firm and serious. "It's not your fault at all. It has nothing to do with you, I promise." He took a deep breath. She's just very, very sad right now. It's a grown-up kind of sadness. It's like the flu, but for feelings. You know how when you get the flu, your body aches and you don't have energy to do anything? It's kind of like that, but it's her heart and her mind that ache. It just happens sometimes, and it can take a while to get better. A flu for feelings. I tried to picture it. I pictured her heart being all achy and tired. "Does it hurt?" I whispered. "I think so, sweetie," he said softly. "In its own way, I think it hurts a lot." Just then, the friendly waitress returned with our food. She slid the plates onto the table with a flourish. "And here we are, 1 coffee for Dad and 1 smiley-face pancake for the birthday girl with extra whipped cream and a cherry nose." It sat there on the plate, a big, silly, happy smile made of cream. Its chocolate chip eyes stared up at me. But I didn't feel happy. I felt like the pancake was making fun of me. I picked up my fork, but I didn't take a bite. I just pushed a piece of a sliced strawberry around the plate, watching it smear the whipped cream. My appetite was gone, lost somewhere in the quiet, heavy house I'd left behind. Dad watched me push the strawberry around my plate. His own coffee sat untouched, growing cold. "You should try to eat a little, sweetie," he said gently. "You need your energy for all the fun birthday things we're going to do." "What fun things?" I asked, not looking up. "Well, anything you want. It's your day. After this, we could go to the park and feed the ducks, or we could go to the toy store. You can pick out any one thing you want. The biggest thing in the store if you want." He was trying so hard. I could hear it in his voice. It was stretched tight, like a rubber band that was about to snap. I felt a pang of guilt on top of all the other heavy feelings. He was trying to make my birthday special, and I was just sitting here being sad. I owed it to him to try too. I cut off a tiny piece of the pancake, making sure to get some of the whipped cream smile on it. I put it in my mouth. It was sweet and fluffy, but it felt like I was chewing on cotton. I swallowed it down with a big gulp of water. "Okay," I said quietly. "The toy store." Dad's relief was instant. "The toy store it is." A brilliant choice. He started eating his own breakfast then, taking big bites of toast and eggs as if he was suddenly starving. We ate in a more comfortable silence after that. It wasn't happy, but it wasn't as painful. It was just quiet. The toy store was huge and bright and loud, a complete opposite of our house. Music was playing and kids were running down the aisles, shouting with excitement. An employee was demonstrating a remote-controlled car that zoomed in circles near the entrance. For a moment, the sheer energy of the place was overwhelming, and I just stood there, inside the automatic doors. Dad put a hand on my back. "All right, birthday girl, lead the way. You're the captain." I walked slowly through the aisles. There was a whole aisle of dolls with fancy dresses and tiny shoes. There was an aisle of board games, with colorful boxes stacked to the ceiling. There was an aisle of building blocks and science kits. It was a palace of fun, but I just felt like a ghost walking through it. Nothing looked interesting. Nothing called out to me. I thought about what I would have picked last year. Probably the giant unicorn stuffed animal I saw, the one with the sparkly horn. Mom and I had seen it a few months ago, and she'd said, "That's almost as big as you." I would have begged for it, and she would have laughed and said, "We'll see." Today, I walked right past it. I ended up in the craft aisle. There were boxes of crayons, markers, paints, and big pads of paper. And then I saw it. It was a kit for making clay animals. It came with different colored blocks of clay, brown, white, black, and orange, and little plastic tools for shaping it. On the front of the box, there was a picture of a lopsided smiling fox. It reminded me of the time Mom and I tried to make cookies shaped like animals, but they all came out looking like funny blobs. We had laughed so hard. "This one," I said, pointing to the box. Dad came up behind me. He looked at the kit, then at my face. He seemed a little surprised. "Really? Are you sure? You could get that giant dollhouse over there, or the new video game system." "I want this one," I said, my voice certain for the first time all day. I wanted to make something with my hands. Maybe if I could shape the clay, I could shape the sad, wobbly feeling inside me into something that made sense. "Okay, sweetie," he said, taking the box from the shelf. "Whatever you want." On the drive home, the toy box sat on my lap. It felt heavy. The cheerful music from the toy store was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of the car engine. Dad had turned the radio off. The closer we got to our street, the bigger the rock in my stomach grew. The bubble of our special day was shrinking, and the quiet, heavy house was waiting. When Dad pulled into the driveway, I saw that the curtains in Mom and Dad's bedroom were still drawn closed. The house looked like it was still asleep. Dad didn't say anything. He just turned off the car, and we sat there for a minute, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. "Ready to go inside?" he finally asked. I just nodded, clutching the clay kit to my chest. He unlocked the front door and pushed it open. The same heavy silence rushed out to meet us. Nothing had changed. The clock on the wall was still ticking. The dust fairies were still dancing in the sunbeams. And from the kitchen, there was no sound at all. Dad set the bags from our trip on the floor. "Why don't you go get started on your clay kit?" he suggested, his voice gentle. "I'm just going to... I'll be there in a minute." I knew he was going to check on Mom. I went to the kitchen table, the one place I'd avoided all morning. The empty counter stared at me, a reminder of the missing pancakes and the missing humming. I opened the clay kit and laid out the contents. There were the blocks of clay, a small plastic rolling pin, and a couple of little sculpting tools. I took the brown clay. It was stiff and cold. I started squeezing it and rolling it between my palms. The warmth from my hands slowly made it softer, more pliable. I wasn't trying to make a fox like the one on the box. I was just shaping. I pulled a piece off and rolled it into a ball for a head. I made a longer, thicker piece for a body. I made 4 wobbly legs. I stuck them all together. It looked a little like a dog. A sad, lumpy dog. I made 2 ears and flattened one of them, so it flopped over. Dad came back into the kitchen. He looked even more tired than before. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, watching my hands work the clay. "That looks neat," he said quietly. I didn't answer. I took a little piece of black clay and made 2 tiny dots for eyes. I stuck them on the lumpy head. Then I made a small, straight line for a mouth. It wasn't a happy mouth. It wasn't a sad mouth. It was just a mouth that wasn't saying anything. I worked in silence for a long time, and Dad sat there in silence with me. The only sounds were the soft squish of the clay and the relentless tick-tock of the clock on the wall. I made another figure, a smaller one this time, and set it next to the first one. Then I made a bigger one. I gave her a long, formless body, and I didn't give her a face at all, just a smooth, blank space. I stood the 3 figures up on the table, the lumpy, silent dog thing, the small child, and the faceless mother. It was my family, our family, today. My eyes started to sting again. A tear I hadn't even felt coming dripped from my chin and landed right on the faceless clay mom, making a dark little spot. I quickly wiped it away with the back of my hand. Dad's chair scraped as he stood up. He walked over to the counter and opened one of the cupboards. He took out a small plate and a single candle, one of the swirly, colorful ones we had left over from my last birthday. He took a small cupcake out of a box from the grocery store bag. He must have bought it when he paid for my toy. He put the cupcake on the plate, stuck the candle in the middle of the frosting, and lit it. The tiny flame flickered, casting a warm, dancing light on the table. He placed the little cupcake in front of me, next to my clay family. He didn't start singing. His voice was thick when he spoke. "Make a wish, Chloe." I looked at the little flame. I looked at my sad clay family. I looked at my dad, whose eyes were shiny with tears he was trying not to let fall. And I looked toward the hallway, toward the closed bedroom door where my mom was lost in her grown-up sadness. There was only one wish I could possibly make. It was a wish so big it filled up my whole chest. I wish Mom would get better. I took a deep breath and blew. The flame vanished, and a thin curl of smoke rose into the air. For a moment, nothing happened. The kitchen was just as quiet, just as heavy. And then I heard it. A floorboard creaking in the hallway. My head snapped up. Dad froze, his eyes wide. We both stared at the kitchen doorway. And then, she was there. Mom was standing in the doorway, wrapped in her robe, her hair messy. She looked pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She looked like she had been sleeping for 100 years. Her eyes weren't glassy anymore. They were just tired and sad. So sad. She looked at Dad. She looked at the cupcake on the table, the wisp of smoke still rising from the candle. And then she looked at me. Her face crumpled. It was the first real expression I had seen on it all day. "Oh, Chloe," she breathed. Her voice was a cracked, rusty whisper. She walked forward, her steps slow and unsteady. She knelt down on the floor in front of my chair, just like Dad had done at the restaurant. She didn't say anything else. She just reached out and pulled me into her arms. It wasn't a happy hug. It was a desperate, clinging hug. I could feel her whole body shaking with silent sobs. I wrapped my arms around her neck and buried my face in her shoulder, breathing in her familiar sleepy time tea smell. The cold, hard rock in my stomach finally started to melt. She was here. She was hugging me. It wasn't fixed. It wasn't perfect. But it was something. I didn't need a party or a big cake or a mountain of presents. All I had wanted all day was this. After a long time, her sobs quieted down. She loosened her grip and pulled back just enough to look at my face. She raised a shaky hand and tucked a piece of my hair behind my ear. Her eyes were red and puffy, but she was looking at me. She still hadn't said it. But as she held my face in her hands, her gaze was more than just words. It was an apology. It was a promise. It was a start. Later that evening, long after Dad had put me to bed, I couldn't sleep. I crept back downstairs for a glass of water. As I passed the kitchen, I saw the light was on. My 3 little clay figures were still on the table, and next to them, someone had added a 4th, a bigger one, standing right next to the faceless mom, its clay arm wrapped around her shoulders. Dad. I took my sad little cupcake from the fridge. I didn't need the candle anymore. Standing there, in the quiet glow of the kitchen light, I took a small bite. And in the silence of the house, a silence that now felt less heavy and more peaceful, I whispered to myself, "Happy birthday,